Good, Good evening and welcome back. It is now time for our first roundtable event, Inspiring Social Entrepreneurship. To moderate the session, I invite SCSS Project Team Leader, Dr. Kumudhu Jayawardena. Dr. Jayawardena is a Senior Lecturer at the Department of Management Sciences, Uvavelas University. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Hiraneda, and welcome everyone to the session. And so first of all, let me give a brief introduction to the resource persons today. So the purpose, the overall objective and the purpose of this session is to have a realistic view and to have understanding about what social entrepreneurship is, because although it's kind of a buzzword, still, many find it a strange word and it's not much common, especially in Sri Lanka. And so for this session, we have invited 4 resource persons. So let me go through their profiles and introduce them to the audience. So the first profile, we invited Dr. Vinya Ariyaratne, representing Sarvodaya Foundation. So he's the current president, and let me go through his profile. As you all know, I don't think I have to give kind of extra introduction to Sarvodaya because it's a very well-reputed social brand in Sri Lanka, and they provide holistic support to the underprivileged of the society, and the mission is to provide awareness and access of education and skill development, healthcare, environment, women's safety and empowerment, and animal welfare across rural as well as urban setups. And Dr. Vinya actively engages in these social works, and at his presentation, he will give us some more about his engagement with the community. And especially, they received the Social Entrepreneur of the Year from the Shabab Foundation World Economic Forum in 2014. So that's about Dr. Vinya. And next we have Mark Majewski Henderson, and he's the Director of Research and Innovation at Glasgow Caledonian University, and actually he worked very closely with us in this Social Enterprise Incubation Program, Social Enterprise Incubation Cell, and they provided us the training and all the support in this endeavor. And especially, he's a very experienced profile. He leads several international cooperation projects around the world in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Central Asia. So, Mark, we warmly welcome you to the session. And next resource person is Ms. Randula De Silva. Randula is the founder and CEO of Good Life X Asia, and a catalyst to empower startups and SMEs in traditional sector to disrupt the old and transition into new economy. And she has been a member of the board of directors at Trace Expert City, and the director of Sri Lankan chapter of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. Randula, it's great to have you in this session, and you are very welcome to the session. And our 4th resource person, he's Mr. Kumarasiri, and he's a special grade officer of the Sri Lankan Planning Services. And because we thought of inviting him because policy is playing a major role when it comes to the creating kind of a conducive flow to grow for these social enterprises to grow as a cohort. So we invited him, and so he's an additional secretary of the Ministry of Finance, Economic and Policy Development. You are warmly welcome to the session. And so this is the format of this session. First of all, the resource person will talk about their involvement on these social enterprises and social entrepreneurship by taking the first 10 to 15 minutes. And then we are going for the Q&A session. So first of all, I'm going to invite Vinya to do his presentation. And if you have slides, of course, you can share the slides. Darshana, have we given the access?
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you please allow me to share the slides?
Yes, we can hear you, Vinya.
Yeah. So there is an echo. I think you have to switch off the mic. Can you hear me? Okay. I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon to all of you. And thank you, Kumudu, for inviting me to share our experience in promote. Sorry, there's an echo. Okay. So thank you for inviting me as a panelist at this summit session today. So I'm going to share the experience of Sarvodaya as a not-for-profit and also a development organization and our experience in Sri Lanka. And because of the time constraint, I'll just be quick in my slides. Firstly, I would like to put this whole presentation in context in relation to the definition of social entrepreneurship. Now, as we understand and as we interpret, social entrepreneurship is really applying an entrepreneurial approach to addressing social issues and creating a positive community change. So it has to address a social issue and it has to demonstrate a measurable change in the community. So social enterprise is an enterprise. It's not a charity project. And social enterprise is a revenue generating business. So there is a clear business dimension to social entrepreneurship. So to put in context the angle from which I present my talk today is when you look at this, it's a continuum. The social enterprise concept is a continuum, as I understand. So you get the traditional businesses on one extreme. Then you get the traditional not-for-profit organizations, which are also called charities. So you get the variations between these entities. And if you look at the traditional businesses, they may, due to ethical reasons, adopt certain approaches which we may call socially conscious purchasing or socially conscious operations. And today, particularly during the last 10-15 years, we have seen the concept of corporate social responsibility or CSR. So that is at more towards the traditional business or corporate sector enterprises. Then if you look at the other extreme, that is the traditional not-profit organizations, they are serving the community through charitable donations or really receiving grants from organizations or individuals and putting them into good use to satisfy basic needs in a community. Within an NPO, you can have revenue generating projects which will generate some financial resources to support the social mission of the organization. So it's running a business within the non-profit entity. Then you can also probably look at a separate revenue generation entity, which will be actually directed at generating a profit within a certain value framework, and then contributing that revenue to the core mission of the non-profit organization. Then of course you can have a hybrid social enterprise where the characteristics of both the corporate sector kind of social responsibility plus the traditional NPO development oriented, charity oriented elements can be found. So this is the range. Now, my organization, the organization that I represent, Sarvodaya Shramadana movement, probably has elements which are more towards this right end of the spectrum, that is the characteristics of a traditional NPO, but having very specific enterprises to support the organization. That's at the organizational level. Then we also promote the concept of social entrepreneurship and promoting the start and the sustaining of social enterprises of individuals, which I will also touch in my presentation. However, as an organization which has a certain philosophical underpinning to our development approach, we recognize that all systems, all beings are interconnected. So it's a holistic approach and an integrated approach. So we believe that in order to we need address poverty and powerlessness, we need to really act in coordination, addressing multiple determinants of poverty and powerlessness. Then development is not just an outcome, but it's also a process. So the kind of philosophy that we believe in, development is as an awakening process where we do not just look at economic dimension, but look at the spiritual, moral, cultural, social dimensions as well. So it has to be an integrated approach, and we would like to promote the concept of well-being, individual well-being as well as community well-being. So with that introduction, I would like to just give an overview of the path that we have taken. It's one of the oldest organizations in terms of its existence in Sri Lanka, working with communities, all communities around the country, regardless of ethnic, religious or geographic boundaries. So 63 years of evolution of this movement. Initially, we can say there was an entrepreneurial approach to addressing social issues and creating positive community change. So the first 20 years, this was a voluntary, completely a voluntary organization, no donor funding, no external support, but it was based on people's sharing of their labor and other forms of local resources to satisfy basic needs of people. Then we entered probably after in the late 1970s, a more social entrepreneurship phase, which is quite different to the earlier phase, and then evolved into one part of the organization as a social enterprise, which is aimed at revenue generating for the organization. So if you look at the first initial start, it had a certain philosophy, which is that the communities, regardless of how poor they are, they had the potential of addressing their own needs. So we presented an idea, it's a philosophy to initiate a process of self-development, and in various forms over the years, we supported those communities, providing them technical support, training, and often also later funding through various channels from outside. But it is really to empower the community to manage their own businesses. So the whole concept of the approach in an entrepreneurial way, we can summarize as if we are achieving a certain physical target, but at the same time, we are through that we achieve a social objective, but at the same time builds the character of the individual and the community. So we call it, we build the road and the road builds us. So it's kind of a message that conveys that we try to achieve something, but in the process is as important as the outcome, because in the process we achieve so many other things. So in the first 20 years of the movement, the satisfaction of basic human needs was the focus, locally planned and resourced, and there was a structure in the approach. So it was entrepreneurial because it was a systematic approach where community needs were identified in a systematic way, and a sustainable way of intervening was recognized. So if you look at the child development services, the preschools in the 1970s, we started around the country, which became kind of sustainable models later, with government policy also coming in for early childhood development. So basic human needs in different forms were carried out, and through volunteer labor, through Shramadana, as well as through funding. So it was kind of an entrepreneurial approach, but it's not the traditional or the modern model of social entrepreneurship. But because it was addressing a social need, and there was a kind of a novel approach where you try to assess the needs and also try to find the resources, just like in a business, we could say that it was an entrepreneurial approach. However, it's very important to keep in mind that we were trying to build. Now, usually we try to measure the success in normal businesses in terms of profit, but here we would like to measure the success in terms of the impact. Now, here capital formation in different forms is very important in the kind of social entrepreneurship that we form. So it's not just the financial capital formation, but the spiritual. It's about relationships, it's about inner peace, it's about creating, promoting moral development, how communities can work together. Then social relationship building in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, how to protect vulnerable sections of our community, how that kind of deprivation is prevented in the name of development. Then only we look at the financial capital formation through enterprise development, which will include village savings mobilization as well as credit. So that was the first phase of the movement's entrepreneurial approach. The second phase was more structured, where there were social enterprises supported by external donors to sustain the work of the organization, because you needed to have an infrastructure, you needed to have full-time workers. So how can you sustain an organization to support community work? So we had many enterprises that were started, and some enterprises were very successful, some due to various external and internal factors were not successful. So that was a phase from late 1970s up until 1998. So we have certain enterprises like educational toys, for like preschool toys and school furniture and so on, which we manufacture and even export, and it is a very steady revenue for our movement. Then we also collect village products, handicrafts and so on, and also are exported, and they are giving a very good revenue to the community organization. So that was the second phase. Then the third phase was more commercial oriented revenue generating businesses. Again, it served a commercial purpose, a social purpose, even though the objective was revenue generation. If you take, for example, a printing business that we had, we promoted for 20-30 years the books written by many eminent authors who wouldn't have otherwise been able to publish their work. So that's one. Publishing was one of the main arms of our social enterprise network. And then later, even up to the finance company, not just microfinance, but having other models evolved over the years. Then now we are also promoting youth and women focused social entrepreneurship. So that is kind of the ecosystem that Sarvodaya is working to promote social enterprises. On one hand, to sustain the organization, social entrepreneurship. On the other hand, really to promote it at the grassroots level, so that this idea of people bringing out their own capabilities and supporting them to achieve a social objective continues, and we are also still in a learning curve. Sorry, I would just I think okay. So I would like to conclude now. In the current phase, we are trying to reach the young entrepreneurs, and probably later in some other at some other forum, probably I can explain a little bit in greater detail. But it's very important that we look at the challenges also. For an organization promoting social entrepreneurship, sometimes there are challenges which are both internal and external. So internally, when you have a kind of a charity development mindset, people can question, you are losing your vision. You are not retaining the vision by going into revenue generation. Then the mindset sometimes is not really towards social entrepreneurship. Then our own human resource capacity, because the workers' experience and so on, is really to do direct grassroots mobilization and development work, not to generate revenue for the organization. Then also capital for startup expansion and diversification have been a challenge. Then externally, when an organization which is a development organization, a grassroots movement, when you go into revenue generation activities in the form of even social entrepreneurship, people will look at, okay, now you have gone into business and you have lost your original objective and so on. So image, public perception. Then legal framework and tax implications. In Sri Lanka, still there is no proper legal framework for promote social entrepreneurship. Unlike in countries like United Kingdom, where there is very clear legislation to support and promote social entrepreneurship. Then lastly, the relationship with all stakeholders, with our own communities, other voluntary organizations, the government and the donors. So it has been a challenge for a development, non-governmental development, grassroots development organization, which was operating around the country, to introduce this concept, but we have been quite successful. I can tell that by 2019, we were able to sustain for about like 60% of our internal organization structure, sustained through our own internal income through social enterprises. So we like to always remind that we need to have an alternative economic system, where in Buddhism, in Singalova Sutra, this is highlighted. We earn through righteous means, but we only use 1/4 of the revenue for consumption. Two portions, or 50% of our revenue, we need to invest in a business or industry. It's not at all contradictory to Buddhist philosophy to generate revenue or generate profit. But we also have to leave 1/4 to be used in an emergency. So this is the kind of Buddhist economics philosophy that we also follow. There are much more detail in terms of the ethical frameworks, and also when we do businesses, there's a strict ethical framework that we follow. I'll not go into the details of that. So finally, the social entrepreneurship is a transformative approach to promoting economic empowerment in a community. We need to, it has to be very individualistic. Even if an individual entrepreneur doesn't give up a wasteful lifestyle voluntarily, I don't think we can sustain such businesses. And also the people who are better off need to support those who have the ability to start up new enterprises like this. So there has to be a sharing of wealth. Then also there are structural injustices. I personally don't think that social entrepreneurship can address all the problems of poverty in this country. It can sometimes be used as a panacea. We have to address structural injustices that are sometimes economic and political. Then we also bring in, I started with this principle, the spiritual dimension. It's very important to remind ourselves that spiritual aspects related to societal conduct of business is not at all an uneconomical thing. There are enough and more research done in the world where they are even discarding the concept of GNP, but looking at even concepts like gross national happiness, like in Bhutan. Then also the community savings need to circulate within the community. We should not go for a credit-based economic system, but a savings-based system. I'll stop here. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vinya, for your presentation, and I think you highlighted I mean, it's very clear for us what a social enterprise is and what kind of a model that if anyone wants to start a social enterprise, what kind of a model they have to go for. Because you provide a classical example in Sri Lanka. And in one hand, you serve your mission and you work with so many vulnerable groups like women, and especially women, those who are not having the access for these skilled groups and the skill development, and then the youth as well, especially those who do not have any access for the skill development programs, very organized skill development programs. And at the same time, so as you mentioned, if I heard you clearly, you mentioned that 60% of the income that you need to run as an organization, I mean, you earn that percent by yourself, which is great. I mean, yes, I mean, so just it's a classical example on how you are balancing the two extreme ends, like the mission end and the financial end. Thank you very much for coming up with the with your case, and it's great to hear to your story. And with that understanding, I mean, it's a great start, because he did the ground clearances, I mean, about the concept and everything. So with that understanding, I'm moving to our second resource person, Mark Henderson, and he works very closely with us, Uvalas University and University of Peradeniya. And Mark, I know you're working with so many countries and to promote this concept, to help the bodies to promote this social enterprise concept and to the social enterprises and entrepreneurs. So here, so I would like to invite you to share your experience in this forum. Mark, up to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Because I read the presentation, and I'm was very impressed with some of the insights and how long you've been working with this in Sri Lanka, and hopefully some of the things I'm saying are relevant as well. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Hopefully you can see this okay.
Yes, Mark, we can see your slides. Yeah.
Yes, we can see you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So as Kamala said, I'm Director of Research and Innovation at Glasgow Caledonian University. And I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the context in which we work. And I think as a university, as all universities, I think we have a great interest in innovation and innovation as a process. And I would say that innovation, from my perspective within the university, is really about how we can evolve the ideas, the research, the learning that takes place within the university, and to ensure that it has real impact. Because really, when knowledge and learning is internal and doesn't externalize, it really has no value. And so really our job within the university is to take it from an internal idea and to develop and to add creativity to that idea, to look at how it can be exploited, and then finally to externalize it. And if you can externalize your ideas and that they have impact, what you do is you generate value. The way I would differentiate between innovation and social innovation is purely that the value you're creating is not just or shouldn't be exclusively commercial value, but it should have social value as well. And so from my perspective as Director of Research and Innovation, my interest in social entrepreneurship and social enterprise is very much within the context of this process. I'm also keenly aware of the ecosystem that surrounds us. And I think it's important to see the social entrepreneurs, the social innovators within this ecosystem, who work within spaces, physical spaces, for delivering what their ideas. And I think that universities have a unique role to play in terms of their role as intermediaries between the policymakers and the governments and the social innovations and the social enterprises that are being developed. And I think Dr. Vinaya said something very, very interesting about this, the idea that social enterprise is not a panacea. It's not going to be the solution to all our social problems. We need investment from policymakers, and we need commitment from governments. And within that context, there are a number of other entities surrounding this ecosystem, the communities themselves and the governments, yes, but also the need to have access to finance to really be able to help grow these social enterprises, as well as open spaces for co-creation, programs for scaling up, so that small scale local social entrepreneurs can then work at a great scale, and even more so to have pathways to internationalize what they're doing. In addition to that, I think there's an important part of the ecosystem is spent promoting and disseminating the programs so that people are more aware of what's happening and what they're doing, as well as mentoring peer-to-peer and also between students and professionals, etc. So I think that this ecosystem is quite complex, and it differs from the say the conventional innovation ecosystems that exist. And I think that importantly, universities have a major role to play within all these elements of the ecosystem. Just a little bit about our own university. And I think I started talking about social innovation, social entrepreneurship around 2012. And I'm very pleased that our university that has always had the motto for the common weal, for the common good, that our university has as its 2030 strategy now to be world leading in social innovation. So there's a real institutional commitment to social innovation, which helps me in my job a great deal. The other thing is that we are totally committed as part of this approach to social innovation, committed to the SDGs, and it has helped to ensure that we, as a small modern university, the university was only founded in 1993, but within the Times Higher Impact rankings, which we see as the most important rankings from our perspective, we are 5th in the world in gender equality, 10th for responsible consumption and production, and 24th for promoting decent work and economic growth. So I just wanted to put this in context, and I think it's really important that universities commit to these areas, and I have to say that certainly in UK and in Europe, many universities are really only just beginning to recognize how important this approach is, and that it forms not part of just for international development, but for at a local level as well. So within the university, we're very lucky to have had previously Mohammed Yunus as our chancellor, and we developed or we established a Yunus Center for Social Business and Health, which researched into social enterprise and the drivers of social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. And they also run a master's program. And I think I just wanted to say this because this is really important, that as universities, we're underpinning what we're doing in terms of incubation with real solid research to help convince the governments and the funders that it's worth investing in, so that there's a greater degree of investment. We have an incubator space, which at the moment is called UHatch, and the UHatch incubator space really looks at how we can support enterprises, but also social enterprises with a specific enterprise emphasis on social enterprise. We can see we have a number of companies that are to a lesser or greater extent related to social enterprise projects. And I should say at this juncture, and it was something that Dr. Vinya talked about, the legal structure of social enterprise within the UK, which is true, we have one. But I think it's also worth underlining that many enterprises that are really values-led and socially conscious do not fit into the narrow definition of social enterprise. And I think it's really important that we stop making divisions between an ordinary enterprise and a social enterprise. Within our incubation space, we have two, these are just some examples of what we have. One which is looking at cyber protection and how we can protect ourselves from malware, etc., and viruses. Another company which is specifically looking at how companies can basically benefit from R&D, research and development funding from the government. These two companies, I would say, are what we might call conventional enterprises. We have two interesting ones here. This is a company called Fashion Detox Challenge, which is basically encouraging not just students, but people to go 10 weeks without buying new clothes. That might not be a problem in Sri Lanka, but it's an enormous problem in the UK, where people are buying a set of clothes for the weekend, which is just disgraceful. But this company has been cited by the UN as a great initiative for helping ethical fashion. Yarden Parish, this is very much is an ordinary company, a fashion company, but it's specifically geared to ethnic minorities who are very often excluded from fashion, and it's really promoting the culture, especially Afro-Caribbean culture in terms of fashion and makeup and accessories. And finally, Giraffe, this was set up by an academic who's a professional physiotherapist, and developed a series of apps and tools so that people could, professional medical staff could use this app to diagnose and give exercises to their patients remotely. And this has been extremely successful, both nationally and internationally. The other thing that we've been doing is we've been developing projects looking at how universities across the world might be able to support social entrepreneurship and social innovation. And as Kamulu said, we've been working very closely with Uba Welesa. We also have a Southeast Asian social innovation network based in Myanmar, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Thailand, a Latin American social innovation network in Chile, Colombia, Brazil, and Panama, and a European social innovation through knowledge exchange project, which we carried out with countries in Spain, entities in Spain, Germany, and Portugal, and Croatia. We have also carried out a project within Asia through the British Council Social Innovation Linkages for Knowledge Exchange Network. Basically, all these projects were predicated on developing social innovation support units specialized in helping this relationship between the universities and the ecosystem. These are some examples of the projects that we carried out in Myanmar, in Thailand, with specially devised knowledge exchange spaces to help develop companies and to work with existing companies. And this is a space in Cambodia, and finally a space in Malaysia. And at the moment, we're doing a project with our students and 5 other countries, social enterprise through virtual environments and remote entrepreneurship. And the idea behind this project has been that we really look at creating transnational teams of social entrepreneurs so that they're working not just within their own countries, but several countries at once with members of the team working individually in the different countries. And this has been, obviously, through COVID, we realized the importance of learning how to manage projects virtually and to create virtual environments. And so this project is very much predicated on a space we've also developed as part of another project, which is like a virtual incubator space where you can develop your projects, but it also is a kind of a linking space. So we have about 400 members from about 40 different countries. So this is a great way for social entrepreneurs to engage with each other. I think I'll leave it there. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And thanks very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. I wish I was there now in the cold of Edinburgh. But it's great to see you all and a great pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much for bringing especially that social innovation ecosystem. I mean, it nicely showed how the different parties can get together when it comes to battle with the social injustice and the bigger social issues, and the policy making and the universities and all together. Thank you very much for, and also thank you very much for bringing those important and very interesting highlights from your university and from your experience. Okay, so Mark will come to the questions at the end of all the presentations, and with that I'm moving to the next resource person. And yes, and now I'm coming to Randula De Silva. Randula, and it's great to have you in our session, and the session is over to you.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm delighted to have listened to both Dr. Vinya and Mark about their experiences of really working on the ground and solving deep and meaningful problems from the very grassroots to all the way into academia. It's very, very inspiring. And I hope I can do justice with sharing the experiences that I have in the short term that we have worked in Sri Lanka as Good Life X. So I've been working in the sustainable private development sector for about 10 years individually. And Good Life X has a lifespan of about 3 years. And Good Life X and my journey currently is bringing together multiple angles that Dr. Vinya very interestingly also spoke about, the development sector mentality, the private sector mentality, and also the academia. How can we bring all of these different perspectives together to really serve one thing, which is social change and economic growth? And this is really what Good Life X proposes to do by bringing all of these things together in promoting innovation and growth and collaboration in the social and entrepreneurial landscape in Sri Lanka. And in most of the conversations that I have, when I speak of entrepreneurship or when I speak of innovation, people tell me, Randula, you know, the whole world can't be entrepreneurs. And for me, entrepreneurship simply is a mindset, regardless of where you're at. It's a mindset of seeing opportunity and possibility to solve a problem and getting yourself out there to actually do it. Regardless whether you have your own business, for-profit or non-for-profit venture, whether or you're an employee or an employer, an academic or even an artist. And it's a mindset that really can help us create a positive impact to the larger world when it's coupled with the right purpose at its core. And this is the sweet spot where social enterprises are placed. I'm a graduate from the University of Colombo too, and it's delightful to know and see these conversations and people of the caliber of Dr. Vinya and Mark coming together to work with the universities to bring forth these dialogues. This was not clearly there during our time, and it's much needed. So my journey in private sector development started with the German Development Corporation, which was a development sector or a development agency. And from there, I also went on to work with the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka, in the north and the western provinces, where I worked closely in the leadership teams of a few private sector organizations like Hatchworks, while I was CEO there for 2 years. And during these roles and times, I understood that on one hand, in the development sector, there was so much of attention going to fixing problems, but not with enough innovation. And on the other hand, with a lot of startup and innovative enthusiasm that we have in the country, there too, there was amazing talent, amazing energy, and amazing attention going into building very pure tech solutions, the next best Internet of Things device or AI technology, without connecting these solutions to a real world problem that we had around us here in Sri Lanka. And these were the disconnected dots that we really wanted to connect through the efforts of Good Life X. And with that, I will share my slides also. Just give me a minute. Can you see my screen? Great. So predominantly, we wanted to connect the dots between what Sri Lanka was excited about, the young emerging tech startups, lots of SaaS solutions, technology, enthusiasm, lots of VC investment, and demo days going into high tech and pure tech startups, versus what Sri Lanka had to offer. All of our abundant natural resources in agriculture, in food, in wellness, in tourism, that really was still, I'm sorry to say this, but was still weighed down with archaic models of the colonial era, which really, really needed a revamping. They really needed to emerge into the future in order to cater to what the world was asking for. There is a global conscious consumer that is emerging really very fast. And are we as Sri Lanka ready to cater to their needs? We are ready with our abundant resources, but we are really not ready in building the channels of really taking these abundant resources in a regenerative way and giving it to the world as they want it. So these are the gaps that we really saw and we wanted to connect. And this is the birth of Good Life X in 2018, where we called ourselves Angry Asians. We were angry at ourselves, firstly, for not seeing this potential that we held in hand. And we were just blindly enthusiastic with all the hype around tech and innovation without seeing how can we channel this into real world problems on the ground in Sri Lanka around us. And also we were angry at the world for not seeing us as able individuals who were able to really connect these dots and give a world-class product or experience into their hands. And with that, we move on to build our first pilot, which was an accelerator. We've never done an accelerator before. And it was a pilot project within a development agency. So you can imagine the way that we were looked at. You can imagine the rules that we had to break within a development sector agency, trying to build an accelerator, which was very innovative and new. But we went on to build it together with the ESCP Business School in Europe. And it was very successful. And we worked with brands like Kimbula Kitul, who work around the Kitul industry, working with about 500 farmers in Sri Lanka, and a few other brands that I'm sure you all know of. With the success of that, we went to Scale the Good in 2020, and we expanded from a food only to food, wellness, travel, and circular design, all-encompassing accelerator. And there's a very interesting story there that I'd like to share with you later in my presentation. And I'm happy to say that in 2021, last year, we became our own self-sustained private entity, and we came out of the donor program as a spin-off because we wanted to really do what Sarvodaya does in being a Sri Lankan entity and working for entrepreneurs and with entrepreneurs to change the narrative of social enterprises or entrepreneurs who are working with a purpose and a mission with society and environment at its core is no longer a CSR activity, no longer a charitable activity, but is the main phenomena, like it is in the UK. It is the main phenomena that really needs all the attention that it can have in order for systems to change, in order for our economic structures to change. So I believe that grass gets greener where you water it. And this is really us watering it for 3 years now. These are the entrepreneurs who worked with us in 2019, the brands that we worked with, 2020, and Yatusha here, the lady right on top, wearing purple. She has a very interesting story. She's based in Kilinochchi, and she was 22 years old when she started her company, Olai. And she comes from the background of a coding school. Jaffna has a very interesting community called the Yala IT Hub. I'm sure you all know them, and you might even work with them already. And they have a coding school for youth who don't get into university. And you all know how much pressure we all get to pass our A-levels, get 4 A's, and get into university, right? What happens to those who don't get into university? Our parents think that our life is over and we need to find a decent job somehow in order to be eligible to get married or whatever. But Yala IT really disrupted this perspective and said, we are going to offer a coding school, a 6-month school program for people who don't get into university to do whatever they want with that skill that they learn. Yatusha went to that coding school. She learned it for 6 months. She built her own website. What did she do with this website? That's what makes it interesting. She connected her website with the Palmyra craft artisans of Kilinochchi. There were lots of Palmyra artisans in Kilinochchi with no access to markets. Not in Jaffna, not in Colombo. There was not enough footfall for Jaffna for it to be a large-scale industry. But with her really working her website and getting their products up on the platform, she's now shipping globally to over 22 countries, the products of the Palmyra artisans. And her model of really doing this business is very different to how a normal lifestyle store in Colombo would do the business. Her profit share ratio is very different. And the way that she enables the artisans to upskill their design talent and work with designers from all over the country is very interesting. So that's just one example that I wanted to share with you. In 2021, we went beyond just working with startups and worked with SMEs also, trying to instill the social-centric and environmental-centric values within their companies so that they become future-proof. It's a fact that it's the SME sector that provides the largest amount of jobs and is the backbone of the economy and has so much of ability to really create a sustaining change for the better and for longer. So we chose to work with companies that were already big and already were in the export markets to instill purpose-centric and social-centric values at their core and help them really grow out from being a conventional company into a much more socially affluent, net positive impact creating company. And I'm happy to say Nishanta here, who's the founder and the CEO of Voga Naturals. He is an entrepreneur who started with 4 acres of land, who's now harvesting organic fruits and spices across 5,000 acres and has over 90% women in his workforce. And Lonali here, she's working on upcycled fashion and providing a lot of jobs to women who are working in the textile sector. And an interesting story to share there is during the COVID lockdown, when corporates who were in exports doing textile and retail, textile manufacturing, had to lay off their staff. Lonali's business really was able to give an income to people who had the skill and who could sew and stitch from home. So these are the type of models and approaches of social entrepreneurs who can really work with the society to really give them back and empower them to have better positioning in an economic standpoint. These are the sustainable travel companies we worked with this year. These are all photos that we have taken of them so that we also give them a spotlight and tell their stories. There's very many stories to tell here, how these guys really struggled and didn't lay off a single employee during the 2 years where there was zero income. But they went into short-term pivots, very interestingly. This guy here created 2 short-term pivots where he had a fleet of vehicles and drivers and no tourists coming in. He went into distributing spice and tea across regions so that he gains an income for his employees in order to keep them paid, and they don't have to get laid off and be without a job. So those are a few examples that I could just share with the experiences that we have. We have international and local partners that we work very closely with. We are just about to go into a very interesting program with British Council as well in social centric and creative industries, in creating a conversation around that, also in the regional economies of Sri Lanka. And I just wanted to share this journey and also reinstate that this is a bold step that we took to step out of the typical and the conventional innovation ecosystem and to really look at innovation that was close to the ground, close to the problems, but also bring together sectors that were more traditional and had more and more resources in their hands that could create greater change for the society as well as the environment around us. So we are an accelerator as well as a customized solution provider for companies all across, from startups to corporates. And the key takeaway that I really want to leave you with is that having a social-centric purpose in your business and being a socially conscious entrepreneur is no longer an option, I would say. This is a growing phenomena in the world because the pandemic really has brought to surface of how differently social entrepreneurs work and how social entrepreneurs sustain communities and sustain the environment. And that's why we hear more and more dialogues around social entrepreneurship happening. And it's very important that we take these models seriously. There's a lot of interesting models that the world is coming up with now, how a social entrepreneur could work, and even different ways of building greater systems like donut economics, for instance. So it's a great time to be alive in, challenging, yes, but a great time to be alive in because these changes are happening. And there's a lot of people who have the ability to create these changes who are now pushing the needle just like us to bring it to the main stage. So I'm very happy to have created this journey for Sri Lanka, and I'm very excited to join forces with all of you to be able to scale the good in a greater level for Sri Lanka and Asia as a whole. Thank you.
Sandula, thank you very much for bringing those experiences and the highlights from your journey. I mean, yes, I mean, helping the community. In most of the time, what we can see is the community is when the community is having problems, the solutions. I mean, third parties come in and they just by force impose in the solutions, and then they come. But the community is feeling like they are just alienated and they are just the solutions are just aliens, and those are not fitting well into the community, because if they want the problem, they want the solution as well. So just helping the community to find their own solutions. I mean, so it was really interesting to hear your journey and what you do here. And so thank you very much, Randula. We'll come to the questions at the end of all the presentations. And with that, I'm moving to our last resource person, Mr. Kumarasiri, Director General, National Planning Department. Okay, so the session is over to you, Mr. Kumarasiri.
Right, thank you very much. I think Ko is coming. Can you switch off your mic? Okay, now I think it's okay. Okay, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this important discussion on the inspiring social enterprise. And I'm very happy and I'm very pleased to be here with you in this special occasion. And of course, after three very inspiring presentations, of course, the private sector and other, the NGO, and providing a lot of insight things at the practically on ground. Of course, my speech very much focused especially on the policies, strategies, and the program in relations to the social enterprise in Sri Lanka. Of course, I have seen three speeches, and of course, especially Mark Henderson has given some base for me, and he has highlighted, of course, government support for the social enterprise very much needed and required. Therefore, I'm very happy after the presentation to deliver my speech. Of course, my speech, I'm not going to share with you only of course, I don't have anything to show you the ground level experience, pictures. I'm very much focused now only the policy as well as the program. Of course, I would get those information, but I just really only look at the policy as well as the programmatic side of it. And social enterprises are creating employment and leadership opportunities for the youth, especially the marginalized communities, working to support the vulnerable children, especially the adults, empowering women and girls. The rise of social enterprises should be examined within the context of the broader paradigm shift in business and employment. An important aspect of this change related to the growing importance of both internal and external social capital for enterprises in general. Especially the social entrepreneurship seeks to create a value or generate a positive impact on society by offering services or products that answer unmet needs, or by offering different solutions to the social challenges. This serves as a mechanism for addressing the unfair solutions or situations that contribute to exclusion or marginalization or suffering within segment of the society that are not empowered or change these situations on their own. Therefore, we have to very much focus, especially the social entrepreneurship. Enterprises are marginalized or disadvantaged group or individuals who do not possess substantial financial means. That is the government intervention very much required, as the previous speakers has highlighted. The employment creation has been an overriding policy focus while increasing agriculture and manufacturing outputs and equitable regional distribution of wealth generated by the enterprises are other priorities. Although Sri Lanka has not very much focuses, especially the policy, on social enterprises in the past, the current national policy framework has more favored and supported enterprises that generate triple bottom economic or environment and also social benefit that will support to the families, those who are expecting to get some support from the government side. In the 2016, SME policy announced that some reference to the social entrepreneurship, stating that the government is support social entrepreneurship, ethical production, and fair trade branding by creating awareness of the concept requirement and the opportunities in the local and international market. That support for the social enterprises to become more productive or more valuable in Sri Lanka. The present national government policy framework for vistas of prosperity and splendor has more favored and also more supported enterprises that generate economic, environment, and social benefit to create more opportunities for the marginalized or vulnerable groups to start some entrepreneurship activities in rural areas. The government emphasizes on the green development initiatives, which gives a room for the eco-friendly social enterprises development in Sri Lanka. That also will create for the it linked with the SDG 2030. The government has allocated resources to create industry-related 200,000 self-employment opportunities within the medium-term framework in the area of agriculture, animal husbandry, and fisheries sector to revive the rural economy with the objective of enhancing their livelihood opportunities. The traditional industries like Tatram, bars, and pottery have been identified as high potential industries. The state ministry has already started to create opportunities or encourage the participation of rural women or youth join these industries by providing new technology and the design, quality raw materials, and advanced marketing techniques. Therefore, this support will generate more employment opportunities and also support the vulnerable communities to engage with the social enterprises. Further, initiate like one enterprise entrepreneur per village or integrated development of rural and traditional industries village. There are many opportunities, especially some with the enterprise development loan scheme has introduced for low-income families in order to enhance their home-based economy and entrepreneurial ventures of the community engaged with the Samudri program. Number of initiatives has already been undertaken to increase the production and export while ensuring the social entrepreneurs. This will create an enabling environment for the social entrepreneur sector, as many social entrepreneurs are agri-business, engaged in food production, marketing, and also livelihood support. In this regard, the concessionary financial support, credit guarantee scheme, and matching grant facilities are also provided for encouraging the vulnerable groups to engage with enterprises. More often now, many development projects introduced very recent past, giving more opportunities and more financial support from the government side to start businesses or the enterprises in the rural area. As such, establishment of industrial zones, improving efficiency and existing industrial zones further value, harnessing maximum from marine resources, identification, allocation of new area for aquaculture production are some promotion actions undertook in 2021, especially focusing the SME and the MSME sector. The national policy framework highlighted SME development and also launched focusing promote high potential SMEs, improve business environment to allow MSME to realize their full potential in the economy. The framework further stresses mission to stimulate growth of MSME to produce world-class products and services that can compete locally and then internationally. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka is its monetary policy stands substantially by bringing down the interest rate to historically low level in the market. Further, several concessional financing facilities were introduced, including interest subsidy scheme, refinance facilities, as well as the credit guarantee schemes, as a coordinated effort of both fiscal and monetary policy pillars to support the businesses and individuals affected by pandemic. Currently, the country is having considerable policy initiatives to support social enterprises. However, there are financial constraints which we need to consider in the concept of ensuring the realization of these strategies. I believe that this forum will be a good starting point for Sri Lanka to discuss and review role and experience in developing policies and also system for the social entrepreneurs in line with the national development priorities and targets to have a more holistic and sustainable development in the country. Of course, existing policy gaps are also there. Now we have to look at, and also two uh, speakers highlighted some challenges and issues related to the social entrepreneurship sector. Especially the Dr. Vinda has already highlighted some challenges to be looked at. Therefore, we have to see the gaps and the challenges, how we are managing it. The common gap to the growth are government regulation and administrative burdens, and also lack of awareness of social enterprises in Sri Lanka. Also, shortage of business skills. To address those issues, we have to look at favorably and as well as look at positively for the benefit of the marginalized groups that will support them to initiate, increase their capabilities. Initiatives have yielded encouraging outcomes, yet I believe Sri Lanka still has a great deal of untapped potential in developing social enterprises. There is much scope to increase the use of financial services, technology, and business support services in order to promote the social enterprises. To achieve this, a more dynamic approach, which entails the combined effort of all stakeholders, including state and the private sector, as well as the NGOs who work direction of the groups where they are working. Despite the numerous challenges, it is encouraging to observe the emergence of organizations which are seeking to operate their commercial ventures to achieve the twin objective of the social mission as well as the profit generation. Their prospects are being enhanced by the trend in consumer choice toward healthier, eco-friendly, and social goods, and the social buyers who are keen to buy goods and services from the social enterprises are emerging as a new force. The budget 2022 has given special emphasis to development of the entrepreneurship in the country. It is stated that a strong entrepreneurial community will ensure then when required, they will not hesitate to serve their nation a critical juncture. As such, government is determined to provide all possible facilities to them. In this budget speech, 5 billion has been allocated as a budget proposal to encourage micro, small, and medium scale private sector investors to engage in the productive, especially milk, egg, poultry, fisheries sector, and also traditional cottage industry and development of textile industry, handloom, and batik. Another 30,000 million has been allocated as a budget proposal to establish the home shop, focusing the rural women. 14,000 women will be promoted as entrepreneurs at the village level. Another 85 billion has been allocated for the regional development, more focusing the livelihood development. This is more very much focuses in relation to the social entrepreneurship. At this last, my focuses finally those who have speakers given some challenges for Sri Lanka in the social entrepreneurship development that has to be looked at. And thank you very much giving this opportunity. Deliver little about the policy programs and the strategies in Sri Lanka in relation to the social entrepreneurship development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumarasiri, and for taking all the policy initiatives to make kind of a fertile floor for these enterprises to grow up. And so we'll come to the questions at the end of this session. And yes, so I hope Vinya is with us.
Yes, I am here.
Oh, okay, Vinya. So Yes. So now, when we take Sri Lanka, now the social, we can see millions of social issues are emerging, and now the farmers are struggling, and in one hand, the women are struggling, and then the kids, the malnutrition definitely it's going up, and so and now we have kind of a severe issue of producing the agricultural products, which says that we are going to, not sure, but having kind of a severe food shortages in the future. So the social issues are emerging. So do you see any potentials with these social problems and issues, with these mounting social issues and problems? Do you see any kind of, do you feel the social enterprises in Sri Lanka, they will have good potentials to start and grow in the future? Can we have kind of an expectation, future expectation about social problems, because I'm sure the private sector is not going to much put their hands into these issues as long as these are not profitable. Unfortunately, not all the social issues are not profitable. So do you see any potentials for social enterprises in Sri Lanka to grow up within the prevailing social problems in Sri Lanka?
So thank you, Kumudu. I think it's a very pertinent question. Um, my own take, actually, my training is in medicine and public health, so I'm very much involved in the nutrition related issues and also the possible food shortages that we are going to have in few months' time. Already, the indicators are demonstrating a very negative trend. So you are very correct. One of the issues, I take the example of nutrition and food security, and would like to just give my opinion on the possibility of having social entrepreneurship concept being applied to enhance food security. I think we need to manage this possible food crisis at a micro level. So if we can make an assessment in each GN division or each village, what are the products, agricultural products, and also the essential food items that are being produced, and we need to get, rather than the producers directly selling to a middleman, can we have the people who are engaged in production and also community based organizations, including farmer organizations, forming uh, collective collectives at village level or community level, and having a food bank where the foods main food items, it may be rice, those which can be kept, already prepare based on the needs, the caloric requirements, of course we know, and that bit of technical knowledge need to be given by social entrepreneurs and even organizations which are having that kind of information with them, and even UN, WFP, all these organizations have lot of macro information, and even the household income and expenditure survey data just presented in draft form few weeks back clearly shows that there is a problem, and there is also a possibility of having a solution at the local level. So in food security, I think if we can look at the food storage, and also we all know that about 20 to 30% post harvest lost is there. So this time we can't afford to have that amount of loss. So can there be technology introduced to store safely food? So I think this is the time for us to start, because from January, February, March, 3 months there will be harvest from Maha season. Already we know that 30-40% of the land have not been cultivated. So, but even the land that have been cultivated, that produce should be directed not towards profit making by middlemen and some exploitative companies, but forming cooperatives and social enterprises by people. I think there's a lot of potential potential there. So I take the example of nutrition and food security. We are already working. Probably in 3 months' time, I should be able to give you an example, maybe successful or unsuccessful example, because we learn from that. But I urge all of you who are involved in social entrepreneurship, this is the best time to address at least the food security and nutrition problem. Thank you. Over.
Okay, thank you very much, Vinya. And next I'm coming to Mark. I know you are working with a lot of countries and a lot of social enterprises globally. So now, Mark, when we look at the pandemic, and it has clearly pushed the people into kind of a very disastrous condition, and according to the World Bank, they say now millions of people are pushed or cornered to the poverty. So which means, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think the private sector is going to put their hands, because poverty is not kind of a profitable business. So do you think with this pandemic situation and with these emerging social issues, how the world trend is going on, regarding the social enterprises, are they increasing in number, or what's going on? Can you bring some highlights from your experience?
Yes, thank you, Kamul. And obviously, um, every country in the world has been affected in some way, some more than others, and some more precarious than others. Now, if I talk about the UK and specifically Scotland, it has had an enormous effect, and I think to a country which, like so many Western countries, is really not resilient, and really has worked on the premise for many years that the best way to create social cohesion is to feed the top and then tax it, and then it will eventually get down to the bottom. And I think that has really changed the paradigm in terms of the way people look at social care, the way that people are looking at how we can look after the most unfortunate and the most marginalized in our societies. But I think it's maybe more complicated because there are, I would say, for three reasons. One is we have the perennial kind of dilemma between whether we should be supporting a capitalist model in order to try and enhance and maybe the kind of European social democratic model which kind of supports capitalism in order to support our social cohesion. And on the other hand, the idea that we should be looking for a completely different paradigm. And I think that there is a very difficult decision to make in those terms. If you look at, there's a very renowned researcher and political analyst, Roberto Mangabeira Unga, from Brazil, and he talked about a minimalist approach to social innovation or a maximalist approach. And the minimalist approach is this vast array of small-scale innovations coming from the grassroots, but their transformative potential is really squandered because they commonly fail to be received and understood. And then there is a maximalist approach, which really looks at a complete transformation, root and branch of our society. And he talks about specifically 4 projects. One is vanguardism, to really support radical approaches and radical perspectives in generating ideas. Secondly, our education system, to really develop programs that are analytical rather than informational. To find ways, thirdly, to find ways to transform the public service so that the state can and should engage civil society. And fourthly, deepening democracy, so to develop systems whereby populations are more directly involved with the democratic process and less vulnerable to exploitation. So I think that I think this dilemma between a total transformation, a revolution, if you like, and trying to do things better within the system that we already have, I think that's the first dilemma. I think the second aspect that I think is really interesting within social innovation, social entrepreneurship, is the whole question of this pandemic has actually opened a door, an unexpected door, in terms of how we might be able to work better virtually. And I think that a lot of social enterprises, and just as a lot of universities and companies across the world are redefining their approach to work and their approach to delivering things effectively, and that kind of virtual versus kind of face-to-face activities is an interesting one. And finally, thirdly, I think there's a really interesting question about international development, because the pandemic has really made countries too inward looking. And of course, countries like the UK have been investing nationally into vaccine programs, but there has been no international approach to vaccination, which of course has really contributed to the variants of the disease, etc. And I think that this national versus international approach is very interesting. And unfortunately, I have to say that the British government at the moment is really becoming more nationalistic and cutting on really important entities like the British Council. Sorry, that was very long-winded, but I hope I've been able to kind of answer your question.
Yes, Mark, definitely. Thank you very much for your thoughts. And yes, I'm next moving to Randula. I'm sure you are working much with the ground level, and especially with all types of entrepreneurs, like social entrepreneurs and the for-profit entrepreneurs. And when we look at these small scale businesses especially, I mean, it's not a problem whether they are the for-profit businesses or they are the social enterprises. When in general, what we see is during the pandemic, they were the most hardly hit group. I mean, the COVID hit them really hard, and most of SMEs, they died and they just went out of the market. And but some SMEs and some business organizations, but they found their success and they found their way out and they've survived. So from your experience, I mean, so why this difference, and in which ways the enterprises should act, especially in a situation of a pandemic?
Thank you for that question. And I'm glad that question came to me. So firstly, I think social enterprises are enterprises that function for profit, but their intention, sorry, there's an echo again.
Sorry about it.
No problem.
Yeah.
So like I was saying, social entrepreneurs are those who work for profit, but with their intention and with their core focus being one of that serves the society or serves the sustainable sustenance of the environment or the communities that they work with. Having said that, what does it mean to make it through a pandemic or adversities brought about by an extended economic suppression or a crisis? And why do some make it and why do some don't? And this is really why there is so much of attention that was also coming onto the social entrepreneurship sector, in my opinion, because of the way that social entrepreneurs and social enterprises work with the communities uh, benefit at its core, and not really only to maximize profits, and that being the first and foremost principle. Social enterprises really work to sustain the communities that they work with and the environment that they're attached to. So if I give an example, in 2020, gosh, it's been 2 years, 2020, when the lockdown was a new word and the new normal was a new word, there was so much of insights that I received from the private sector, that was extreme profit driven private sector, where the only thing and the only reason that they exist was for profits, as well as the social enterprise sector, where they had so much to think about in terms of their people, their communities, and the reason that they exist. And it truly was interesting to see how each of these categories solved a single problem. When private sector went to profit-driven private sector went to lay off employees, and their first decision is either salary cuts or how do we, extend the lifeline or extend the financials that we have right now to sustain the next 2 years. The social entrepreneurs looked at things like resource sharing. We can't afford to pay for these, and these services on our own anymore. And how do I still get the same service, or how do I share the resources that I have with somebody else who might need it, but split the cost? It might be basic things like accounting services, HR, or legal services even, so that these people and service providers were also in business and were working together with these companies, but they were open to be sharing resources with other social entrepreneurs who could also benefit from those services without really having a closed door approach. So that was one example that that I wanted to share to reinstate the fact that the way a social enterprise operates, way a social entrepreneur operates, is very different to how a typical pure profit-driven entrepreneur operates. And the sustenance of, or how social entrepreneurs survive, or how any entrepreneur survive in adversity situation like a pandemic, is really dependent on how they use their resources, or how they really work with the problems that they have in hand, and sees opportunity for it to be something that brings a positive impact back to the company or back to their cause. And on the other hand, also, how do they create short-term pivots, or really look at other innovative ways to sustain, generate income, or to stay afloat in order to keep their employees paid. So one example is a company we worked in Trincomalee with, who had 70 families to feed, who were all their employees. It was a tourism company. Again, no tourism, not even domestic travels for the whole year of 2020, because the entire year was into a lockdown almost. But what did they do? They went into organic fertilizer manufacturing, as well as home garden seed planting. And they distributed and they sold these products across the eastern province, by which they could continue to feed their employees. Were these employees trained as organic fertilizer manufacturing people? No, these were people who were trained to be hospitality sector service providers, but they were willing to change and adapt and really do what they had to do in order to keep themselves fed. So that adaptability, I think, is what really keeps anyone afloat in a adverse environment. And touching on the point of brought about, I'm diverting a little bit now, the fact mentioned by Mark about minimalist and maximizing approaches. I think the way to look at it really is not in terms of a dilemma. I don't think it's an either or. I think there are players who are, like myself, working in the minimalist approaches of really working with people on the ground who are disrupting small scale things in their regions. And on the other hand, you have people who are also working in the large big picture narrative of maximizing of the maximizing approach. And it's important to have both these forces working parallelly without, I think, waiting for one to happen for the other to come around. So that really is our take on it, which is why we don't wait for any policy or any a player to come through. We just really work with people who are willing to make a change, whether it's the government, whether it's the academia, whether it's the private sector. Everybody's equally important in this journey. Thank you.
That's very interesting, Randula. Thank you very much. And last I'm coming to I'm coming to Mr. Kumarasiri. So now my question to you is, apart from, the rural development and SMEs development in general, do we have any hopes in the future? Can we expect some specific policies to nurture these social enterprises in Sri Lanka, or a third sector in Sri Lanka? Because I know this third sector, it's not a famous word in Sri Lanka, but when we look at the other countries, it's emerging, and it's emerging as the third sector of development, just like the private sector and the government sector. So my question is, can we have some hopes on policies specifically designed for the social enterprises, or to nurture a social enterprise sector in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, but I will come to your question later. But your first question you raised to Dr. Vindhya regarding the food security and how the country will be maybe the food shortage. Of course, a lot of discussions going on here and there, and especially in the media and the social media. Yes, I think we have to look at the positively to, of course, create environment to available food for the really for the marginal groups or the poverty groups, those who are not having much income. Therefore, this week, Cabinet has approved huge the package, the relief package for many people, especially development of home gardening. Government has started discussion and the meeting Tuesday at the Finance Ministry to develop the home gardening, the small scale one and the little larger ones, and government will provide some grants to the people who are interested. At least the home level generate or produce some food for the home consumption. Then at least that will support some extent for the shortage if coming months, at least to overcome this issue, and will provide some seeds, plants, and various supports, and also maybe the carbonic fertilizer as well in the package. That will support for many families who are interested less than 20 purchase as well as more than 20 purchase. Depending on your willingness and your expectation, government will provide financial support for each family who are willing to engage with the program. Other than that, we already started last year 100 the mini storage facilities at the rural level with the Ministry of Agriculture. The World Bank loan has funded for this initiative. Because of COVID now, we are not completed, but almost completing. That will generate or create for the farm organizations to handle it. And those storage facilities will provide some support, keeping food some good condition, at the village level. As Minda said, that may be a good initiative. We already started last year, and we want to increase little more in various locations. That is one of the opportunities the rural farmers will get from the government. Now we almost construction completed, and that will start very soon. And also, and he also pointed out the losses from the produced vegetables and other commodities. Therefore, we have already started and initiated the processing centers close to these marketing centers in Sri Lanka. The 13 or 14 locations we already identified, and other new locations we are going to establish, and we'll hand over to the private sector to continue run the business with the support of the government. That also will start very soon. That the process already started, and that also will create opportunity to use excess the commodity or the vegetables, any fruits available in the area, that will benefit. And also, I last week, 2 weeks before, I was in the Monaragala district with the World Food Program country director. We have seen the vegetable price in those areas, half of in the Colombo prices is very much higher, maybe double, maybe triple times. And the middleman is earning more. The consumers as well as the producers are losing. They don't get much benefit from this. Therefore, as he proposed, maybe community, we can engage with the farm organization to collect and transport and selling in those places, that the benefit will get farmers as well as the consumers. That has to be arranged. I think we have to work with the NGOs, maybe different farm organizations, some other societies, maybe with the companies, to support this the market linkages in the area. Of course, we should not expect the food shortage, but we have to have a programs and some actions to be taken very soon to overcome these issues coming months. And also, you raise the questions regarding the hopes. I think, yes, we have to, as I explained in my speech, we have to look at especially the social entrepreneurship development. And also now at the moment, even we got some funds, the grants from the EU. So this is one of the example we are talking now, that support given to you and to start some work, and the British Council also work with us, and we have to expand the social entrepreneurship the development programs with many agencies. We could look at more. We are getting more grants from the USA, the UN agencies, as well as the EU grants already there, and we are developing it, and we can look at more positively and more generated some funds focusing the social enterprises as a planning DG at the Treasury. Of course, that I could do some more from the planning perspective. When we receive the proposals, we can incorporate those aspects coming months and the coming years. I think this is a good opportunity me to discuss and have the dialogue coming planning process. We could look at more positively to engage with the social enterprises. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for highlighting those initiatives. Actually, we hopefully think that they would be able to make kind of a positive impact in our society. Okay, so I think we are approaching to the last part of this session, and yes, a few more questions for the resource persons. First of all, yes, and here we have so many student impact leaders, and they are struggling to raise their ventures. I mean, we incubated like 15 students and great social ideas, and they are having number of challenges, but as entrepreneurs, we are not here to complain about what we are not having. We take everything as opportunities. So that is what they are doing. They are doing an awesome job. And even within this pandemic situation, they have been able to start up their ventures. And there are so many students who have started and who are trying to start their social ventures. So I'm coming to Mark first. Mark, so what is your advice, and what kind of tips you want to give for these budding social entrepreneurs? They will be the impact leaders tomorrow. So what you have to say?
It's a very difficult question, I think, and I'm going to give you a personal answer. I think that you should never listen. I'll rephrase that. It's very good to listen to as many pieces of advice as you can, but make sure that you have the confidence to do what you think is correct. And I think invariably, when people give you advice, they're giving you advice within the context that they enjoy and the context that exists for them. But very often your context will be very different. And I think that this is the key to creativity. And I think, I'm a very bad father, because when my kids ask me for advice, my route to where I have come today is totally unconventional. So I just think that taking different routes that people haven't discovered before is always more enriching than treading the same route that somebody from before. So I think, yes, be very careful of advice given to you, because it comes from people who have experience within their context, not necessarily within yours.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And next I'm coming to Randula. I know you work so much of the ground, and you're working with so many entrepreneurs from SME scale to the large scale entrepreneurs. So Randula, I mean, we have so many budding entrepreneurs and impact leaders, social entrepreneurs here, student leaders. So what is your advice? What do you have to say for our students and the impact leaders?
I think Mark put it so beautifully. I was jumping out of my chair agreeing, because he said it best. Really believe in the possibility and not the propaganda. And trust me when I say this, I learned it the hard way too. Being raised in Sri Lanka, and this is coming from, again, a very personal level, but also I think from a level that relates to where you are as students in a national university, and trying to be an entrepreneur, and is interested in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I've been there, I've come through that as well. And there's so much of noise around us, so many information loops in social media, in news, in your peer groups. And this is not a message to say be arrogant. It's a message to say, listen, but decide with your own conscience and with your own intelligence. So don't fall for the propaganda, don't go with the wave, but really believe and try to see the possibility of what fits your ability to make a contribution in your best self and best way. Because our existence, honestly, and this is not coming from me being a millennial or me being a Buddhist or anything like that, but it's coming from a place as a human. Our existence is to not really, stock up all the stuff that we can and die a death of being a man full of possessions, but it really is to create a legacy with our best possible contributions to the world. So you can decide for yourself, you know your gifts, you know your skills, you know your attitudes well. How can you, and in which position can you position yourself to give your best self to the world? If you choose your path according to that thought process, I think um, that's where the most amount of miracle creators and magic creators we have seen in the world comes from. And it might, again, like Mark said, be an unconventional path. My mother still doesn't understand what I do. I don't even try to explain it to her anymore, but she trusts me to make a decision that's right by me. So build that trust with people who really matter to you, and trust yourself to make that decision so that you can make the best contribution you can as being born as a human being.
Thank you, Randula. That's really interesting. And if I ask Mr. Kumarasiri, what's your message for our budding entrepreneurs and social impact leaders?
Actually, Randula just explained whatever the information I want to share, but she has clearly mentioned everything. But of course, as a government officer, I'm not doing the business actually, and I of course like to do the business, but in my position I can't do. But I really like, because we also gone through the same setup at the university, but now there are a lot of opportunities for the undergraduates and the leaders at the university to engage with the activities conducted by you. I think of course, there are a lot of challenges. Everything is challenge. We should not give up. We have to encourage ourselves. We have to have a vision where I'm going. Then with that vision, you have to direct. Of course, in Sri Lanka, in our culture, one person might come and say this is good, but 99 will say this is not good. But if we are feeling this is my best option for my life, yeah, then go ahead with that. I don't think we should not listen to them. If I'm totally correct, I'm doing the good thing for the country or for myself or for the region or the village, that you have to get that courage and do it. I don't think if you are confident in yourself, that is the best. Of course, I know there are a lot of challenges in Sri Lanka, but time to come, then you are there finally. I think this is my advice as a government officer. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have like 5 minutes more. And if the audience is having any questions, you can ask, and I can direct the question to the relevant party. Or they can bring the mic for you if you have any questions. We have very limited audience physically present here, and most of them are online. Okay, so if the audience does not have any questions, let me thank all the resource persons. Thank you very much, Mark. Vinya, he left a bit early because he had some other commitments to attend. Thank you very much, Mark, as always. And Vinya and Randula, this is the first time we met. But thank you very much, and it was great to hear. And Mr. Kumarasiri, thank you very much for your time and your ideas and everything. Stay safe, everyone. Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All the best for all of your ventures.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Jayawardena. I think we could all agree that that was a very informative session. I now invite Dr. Prasad Mahindaratna to present a token of appreciation to Dr. Kumar Jayawardena.
Thank you, sir. So we are moving to another important event in this entire program. So I would like to invite Ms. Mihiri Vimalasena, Social Enterprise Incubation Cell Incubating from the Department of Management Science, Faculty of Management, Uvavelas University, to pitch her social business idea in this platform.